The display screen showed a picture of Earth that was missing half its soul. Ressi noticed it right away. She always noticed things. That was her problem, according to every teacher she had ever frustrated with too many questions. The little Kethari girl sat in the second row of the United Learning Hall on Palaner Station, all 6 legs tucked beneath her fox-like body, her wide ears rotating slowly as she studied the image on the wall. Earth, classified as a mid-toxicity death world. The display showed rolling green fields, small domestic animals grazing near simple structures, and humans standing among crops with calm, blank expressions. The entry was 4 lines long, 0.4 lines. For an entire planet. Ressi looked left at the entry for Gorvan Prime. 26 lines. She looked right at the entry for the Vilu Archipelago worlds. 31 lines. She looked back at Earth. For lines. No mention of forests. No mention of oceans. No mention of anything with teeth. Instructor Polani stood at the front of the classroom, her tall feathered body casting a long shadow across the display. She was Vilu, owl-like and dignified, and she had been teaching galactic natural history for longer than most of her students had been alive. She moved past Earth without pausing. "Instructor," Ressi said, raising one small paw. "Why is the Earth entry so short?" Polani did not look back at the screen. The Council-approved curriculum contains all relevant information for each listed world, Ressi, but there are no predators listed. Every other world has predators. Earth's ecosystem is adequately represented. Please open your notes for the next section. Ressi did not open her notes. She stared at the screen and felt something she could not name. It was the feeling of looking at a hole in a wall and knowing that someone had put it there on purpose. Beside her, Findu sat like a boulder. The Gorvan boy was twice the size of every other student, his body covered in thick armored plates that shifted when he breathed. He was gentle and quiet and afraid of nearly everything, which was unusual for a species built like a living tank. He had been nervous since the morning announcement that a human guest lecturer would be joining their class. "Humans are Deathworlders," Findu had whispered to Ressi before the lesson. "They breathe a corrosive atmosphere. Their bones repair themselves. Their planet tries to kill them every single day. So why does the entry only have 4 lines?" Ressi had asked. Findu had not answered. The classroom door opened. The man who walked in was not what any of them expected. He was not enormous. He was not covered in scars or carrying weapons. He was average height for his species, with dark hair cut short and calm brown eyes that moved across the room slowly, taking in every face. He wore a simple gray jacket and carried a worn leather bag over one shoulder. There was an old scar on his left forearm, faded white against his skin, but he made no effort to hide it or display it. "Good morning," he said. His voice was quiet. "I'm D.A.V. McGuire. I will be your cultural studies guest for this term." Findu's armored plates locked tight against his body with an audible click. Several students leaned away from the human as he passed. D.A.V. noticed. He said nothing about it. He simply set his bag down on the side table and turned to face the class with his hands at his sides, open and still. "I understand you have been studying cooperative species across the galaxy," D.A.V. said. "I look forward to learning alongside you." Polani stepped forward to formally introduce him, but Dav's gaze had already moved to the display screen behind her. He saw the image of Earth. He saw the 4 lines of text. He saw the green fields and the small animals and the blank-faced humans standing in sunlight with nothing around them. He did not get angry. Ressi watched his face carefully and saw something else move through it. Something heavier than anger. His eyes stayed on the screen for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice had not changed at all. "Instructor Polani," he said, "where are the rest of the animals?" Polani straightened her feathers. "The display reflects the council-approved curriculum." "I see that," D.V. said, "but this is not Earth. This is a garden with the walls painted green. Earth has forests that stretch for thousands of kilometers. It has oceans deeper than this station is tall. It has creatures that would take your breath away." He paused. "Where are they?" "The curriculum is complete, Lecturer McGuire." D.A.V. held her gaze for one more second. Then he nodded slowly and turned back to the class. He smiled, and it was a kind smile, and he began his lecture on human agriculture as though nothing had happened. But Ressi had seen his face. She had seen what moved behind his eyes when he looked at that screen. It was not confusion. It was grief. The quiet, steady grief of someone who had come home to find the family photographs taken off the walls. After class, the hallways filled with students. Ressi moved against the current, slipping between legs and tails and armored bodies until she found DAV standing alone at the observation deck, looking out at the star field beyond the station glass. She climbed up onto the railing beside him. He glanced down at her and waited. What did they remove? Ressi asked. DAV was quiet for a while. The stars reflected in his eyes. They removed the ones that made us who we are, he said. 2 days passed before Ressi broke into the archive. She told herself she was only looking. That was what she always told herself when her curiosity pulled her somewhere she was not supposed to go. The station library on Palaner was enormous, a spiraling tower of data terminals and crystal storage drives that held the accumulated knowledge of 46 species. But beneath the public floors, locked behind council security codes, sat the deep archive. Pre-harmonization records. Files from before the council decided what the galaxy was allowed to remember. Ressi was small. She was fast, and she had spent 3 years figuring out which maintenance shafts connected to which restricted corridors. The deep archive terminal glowed pale blue in the dark. Ressi plugged in her student access codes and began searching. Most Earth files were sealed. Heavy black bars covered the entries, with council authorization stamps across them like locks on a door. But fragments remained. Old expedition reports from the first alien survey team that had visited Earth roughly 300 years ago. Notes written by biologists who had walked on human soil and recorded what they saw before anyone told them to stop. Ressi read the fragments 3 times. Her paws shook. The reports described animals. Not the small, soft creatures from the classroom display. These were something else entirely. Coordinated pack predators that hunted in organized groups across vast territories. Creatures that communicated through body language, scent, and long-range vocalizations. They formed lifelong pair bonds. They raised their young communally. They mourned their dead, and they lived beside humans. Willingly, the survey team had been baffled. Their notes were full of disbelief. One researcher had written, "The predators do not attack the humans. The humans do not cage the predators. They simply exist together, as though this arrangement is the most natural thing in the world." Ressi saved the fragments to her personal drive and went to find DAV. She found him in his temporary quarters on the lower deck. The room was small and plain. A bed, a desk, a window looking out at nothing. DAV was sitting at the desk reading when she knocked. He opened the door, looked down at her, and stepped aside without a word. She showed him the fragments. He read them slowly, his face still and quiet. When he finished, he set down her datapad and reached for his own personal tablet. "The council erased the records," he said, "but they could not erase what I carry." He opened a folder of photographs. Real photographs, taken on Earth. Ressi saw forests so green they hurt to look at. Mountains with white peaks cutting into blue sky. Rivers winding through valleys like silver thread. And then she saw them, animals. For legs. Thick fur. Long faces with sharp ears and sharper eyes. They moved through the photographs like ghosts, gray and white and brown, running across snow and standing in tall grass and lying together in tangled piles of warmth. "These are wolves," DAV said. Ressi could not speak for a moment. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. They were both things at the same time, and she did not know how to hold that feeling. "Pack hunters," DAV continued. "Apex predators. A wolf pack can bring down animals 10 times their size through coordination, endurance, and patience. Their jaws can crush bone. They can run for hours without stopping. They are one of the most effective predators Earth has ever produced." Ressi's ears flattened against her head. "And humans lived with them. We did more than live with them." DAV swiped to a new photograph. A wolf lying beside a campfire, its head resting on its paws, eyes half closed. A human child asleep against its side. Thousands of years ago, Before we built cities or ships or anything the Council would call civilization, humans and wolves found each other. We did not trap them. We did not break them. Two species that were both dangerous, both social, both loyal to their families, looked at each other across a fire and decided that the world was less frightening together. He showed her more. A wolf pressing its forehead into an old man's open hand. A wolf howling on a hillside while a human sat beside it, watching the sunset. A wolf running alongside a human through a field, both of them moving with the same joy. Some wolves stayed while, Davy said. Some chose to walk beside us. And from those wolves, over thousands of years came dogs. Every dog that has ever lived is a descendant of a wolf that chose trust over fear. But the wolves that stayed wild were never our enemies. They were our first teachers. They taught us how to hunt in groups, how to protect the weak, how to call to each other across the dark. Ressi stared at the photographs. Why would the Council erase this? DAV closed the tablet gently. Because the idea that a Death World species could form a bond with an apex predator, not through conquest but through mutual choice, terrifies them. It does not fit their model. They believe civilization comes from control, from suppressing the dangerous parts of nature. The idea that two predators could look at each other and choose love over violence is something the Council cannot explain and cannot control. So they erased it. A sound came from the doorway. Both of them turned. Findu stood there, filling the entire frame. His armored plates were drawn tight. His wide eyes moved from DAV to the tablet, to Ressi and back. You are saying, Findu said slowly, his deep voice barely above a whisper, that your species tamed death itself? DAV looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No, he said, we befriended it. Nobody in the classroom was breathing. DAV had been standing at the front for less than a minute and had not yet shown a single image or spoken a single fact. He had simply asked a question, and the silence that followed was doing all the work. What does it feel like to be alone in the wild? 30 students sat in their rows. Ressi was in the front, her 6 legs folded tight, her ears pointed straight at DAV. Findu sat behind her like a mountain that had learned to use a chair. Across the room, students from a dozen species shifted and blinked and thought about the question that a Kethri girl near the back raised her paw. It feels like everything is watching you. A Vila boy near the window clicked his beak. It feels like you're already being hunted. DAV nodded. Humans felt the same way. A long time ago, before we had walls or fire or weapons, we were small and soft and slow compared to the things that wanted to eat us. We walked through a world full of teeth, and we were afraid every single night. He let that sit. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small audio device. It was old, scratched, clearly something he had carried for years. I want to play you a sound, he said. It is a sound that most species in this galaxy have never heard. I ask that you simply listen. He pressed the button. The sound that filled the classroom was long and low and impossible to ignore. It started deep, rising slowly into something high and clear and lonely, a single voice calling out across a distance that felt bigger than the room could hold. It was not a scream. It was not a roar. It was something in between, something that carried weight and sadness and strength all at the same time, that a wolf howl. The effect was immediate. 3 students pressed themselves against the backs of their chairs. A Selthery girl near the door froze completely, her compound eyes wide. Findu's armored plates locked together so tightly that Ressi could hear them grind. Even Instructor Polani, standing at the side of the room with her arms crossed, took a small step backward. DAV let the silence return. He waited. He watched their faces. Then he pressed the button again. This time, the first howl was answered. A second voice joined, lower and rougher, overlapping the first. Then a third, then a fourth, then more, rising and falling, weaving around each other like threads being pulled into a single rope. A full pack, calling across a valley, their voices filling the night with something that was not quite music and not quite language, but was absolutely, undeniably communication. This is a wolf pack, DAV said quietly. They're calling to each other. The message is simple. It means, I am here. Where are you? Come home. He set the device down and turned to the display screen behind him. He had loaded his own photographs. The first image showed a wolf running through deep snow, its body stretched long, its golden eyes locked forward. Power and grace and absolute focus. This is an apex predator, DAV said. Jaws that can crush bone. Endurance that can outlast almost any prey on Earth. A mind built for strategy, patience, and teamwork. He changed the image. A wolf curled around 3 small pups, its nose resting on the smallest one's back. The pups were asleep. The wolf's eyes were open, watching. This is a parent, DAV said. Next image. 2 wolves standing side by side on a ridge, shoulders touching, looking out at a valley below them. They were leaning into each other slightly, the way old friends do. These are partners, DAV said. Wolves mate for life. They raise their young together. They grieve when they lose each other. A wolf that loses its mate will sometimes stop eating. Sometimes it will howl alone for days, calling for someone who will never answer. The room was completely still. Next image. A wolf pressing its broad forehead against a human's open palm. The human was kneeling. The wolf's eyes were closed. And this, DAV said, is trust. He turned back to the class. Humans did not conquer wolves. We did not cage them, or chain them, or force them to obey. 2 species that were both dangerous, both afraid, both trying to survive in a world that wanted to eat them, chose to stand together. Not because one was stronger, because both were tired of being alone. Instructor Polanyi stepped forward. Lecturer McGuire, this material has not been reviewed or approved by the curriculum board. DAV looked at her. There was no defiance in his face. No anger, just steady, patient clarity. With respect, instructor, he said, you cannot approve something you have been ordered to forget. Polanyi stopped. Her feathers tightened against her body. She said nothing more. DAV turned back to the students. The council removed wolves from your records because they are afraid of what wolves represent. Not violence, not danger. The opposite. The possibility that the most powerful thing in the universe is not a weapon or a wall. It is the choice to trust someone who could destroy you and to let them trust you back. The lesson ended. Students filed out in silence. Ressi did not move from her seat. Tears sat in her wide eyes, and she did not wipe them away. Fendu had not blinked in several minutes. That evening, Polanyi filed a formal report with the station's council liaison. She did it quickly and quietly and told no one. That night, DAV received an official summons on his datapad. The Galactic Council's Regional Harmonization Board wanted to speak with him. Ressi found out within the hour. She ran to Fendu's quarters and banged on his door until it opened. They are going to silence him, she said. Fendu looked down at her. For the first time, his plates were not locked tight. They were loose. Ready? No, he said. They are not. The hearing chamber smelled like metal and silence. DAV walked in with his hands at his sides, his bag left behind, carrying nothing at all. The room was circular, built from dark stone and polished steel, with 3 elevated seats at the far end where the council representatives sat looking down at a single chair in the center of the floor. It was the kind of room designed to make the person in that chair feel small. DAV sat down and did not look small at all. Overseer Bramali occupied the center seat. She was Selthery, an insectoid species with a segmented body and compound eyes that reflected the chamber lights like wet glass. Her movements were precise and mechanical, every gesture calculated. She had overseen the Harmonization Review Board for 22 years and had never once reversed a ruling. Beside her sat 2 lesser officials, a Gorvin and a Ketheri, both watching DAV with the careful blankness of people who had already decided. Advocate Nurin stood at Dav's side. She was Vilu, same species as Instructor Polanyi, tall and feathered, but older, her plumage faded to a dull gray. She had been assigned to represent DAV and clearly wished she had not been. She held her notes like they might bite her. Bramali spoke first. Her voice was flat and clean. Lecturer DAV McGuire of Earth. You're charged with dissemination of unapproved Death World biological data to minors enrolled in a council-accredited educational program. Do you understand the charge? I do, DAV said. The harmonization protocol exists to maintain galactic stability by regulating the distribution of information that may cause fear, panic, or destabilization among member species. Earth's predatory fauna were classified as restricted under Section 14 of this protocol. You presented restricted material without authorization. Do you dispute these facts? I do not. Bramali tilted her head. The compound eyes caught the light. Then we may proceed to sentencing. The recommended penalties range from formal censure to permanent expulsion from council-affiliated space. Advocate Nurin shifted beside DAV. She opened her mouth to offer a prepared defense, something about cultural misunderstanding and unfamiliarity with local regulations. DAV placed his hand gently on her arm. She stopped. Overseer, DAV said, "May I speak before you rule?" Bramali paused. The chamber was quiet. "You may." DAV did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He sat in that small chair in the center of that large room, and he spoke as though he were sitting across a kitchen table from an old friend. "I'm not going to argue with your protocol," he said. "I'm not going to challenge the authority of this board. I understand why you did what you did. You looked at Earth, and you saw a world full of things that kill. You saw humans walking through that world, and you could not understand how we survived. So you decided the simplest answer was to make the dangerous parts disappear. I understand that. Fear makes people simplify things." He paused. Bramali said nothing. "But I would like to tell you a story," DAV said. "Not about policy. About a wolf." The chamber waited. "My grandfather lived on a farm at the edge of forest in a cold part of Earth. One winter, a wolf appeared near the property line. It was old. It was hurt. One of its back legs was damaged, and it could not hunt. It came to the edge of the trees every evening and sat in the snow and watched the farmhouse with yellow eyes." Dav's voice was steady, unhurried, like the story had been waiting inside him for a long time. "My grandfather did not shoot it. He did not chase it away. He walked outside every night and left food at the halfway point between the house and the trees. Scraps of meat, bones, whatever he could spare. The wolf never came closer than 50 meters. My grandfather never pushed. This went on for 3 months. The Gorvan official leaned forward slightly. The Kethri official had stopped blinking. The wolf healed slowly. It began to move better. It could hunt again. My grandfather kept leaving food anyway, and the wolf kept coming anyway, and neither of them ever crossed that 50-meter line. They had an understanding. Not ownership, not control. Just two living things saying to each other, 'I see you. I will not harm you.'" Dav's hands rested on his knees. The scar on his forearm caught the light. "One spring morning, my grandfather walked outside and found the wolf lying near the tree line. It was dead. Old age, not injury. It had come back to the place where it had been shown kindness, and it had laid down, and it had stopped. And on the doorstep of the farmhouse, there was a fresh-killed rabbit, still warm, left there some time in the night." The chamber was silent. "A gift," DAV said. "The last act of a wild thing that had never been tamed, never been trained, never been owned. It simply learned, in its own way, to say thank you. And then it came home to die." Nobody moved. Bramali looked at DAV for a long time. Then she straightened in her seat and spoke in the same flat, measured voice. "The board finds the charge substantiated. Your teaching credentials on Palaner Station are revoked, effective immediately. Your cultural files will be submitted for full review. You will be confined to your quarters until transport arrangements are finalized." DAV nodded. He stood. He walked toward the door. When it opened, the hallway was full. Students lined both walls. Not just his class. Students from other sections, other levels, other species. Ressi stood at the front, her small body trembling. Findu stood behind her, enormous and still, his plates loose. Nobody spoke. As Davy walked between them, one by one, they bowed their heads. Ressi, Findu, a Selthri girl, Avila boy, 30, then 50, then more, lining the corridor in silence. Dav walked through them without stopping. He did not look back, but his eyes were bright, and his jaw was tight, and his hands were steady at his sides. That night, alone in her quarters, Ressi pulled up the station's public broadcast network on her terminal. She studied its structure for a long time. Then she began a plan. At midnight, the station sang. It started low, so low that most of the beings on Palantir felt it before they heard it. A vibration in the walls, a hum in the floor beneath their feet. Then it rose, climbing through the corridors and commons and sleeping quarters, filling every hallway with a sound that none of them had ever heard and all of them somehow recognized. A single voice, long and raw and achingly lonely, calling out into the dark as though searching for something it had lost a very long time ago, a wolf howl. Resi had uploaded the audio files to the station's ambient broadcast channel. It was the background system, the one that played soft tones during rest cycles and gentle alerts during shift changes. Nobody ever paid attention to it. Nobody ever thought about it. It was invisible, like air, and Resi had turned it into a throat. The first howl faded. Then a second rose to meet it, lower and rougher, overlapping the first like a hand reaching for another hand. Then a third, a fourth. The pack chorus built and built until the entire station hummed with it, the metal walls carrying the sound the way a valley carries wind. Thousands of beings heard it. In the residential decks, a Gorvan family stopped eating and sat perfectly still, listening. In the engineering section, a Cell-3 maintenance crew paused their work and turned toward the speakers, their compound eyes wide. In the observation lounge, a group of Vila traders stood at the windows as though the sound was coming from the stars themselves. Nobody knew what it was, but something about it reached past language and species and every wall that civilization had built around the animal parts of the brain. It was the sound of something alive calling out to something it could not see, saying the oldest words in existence. I am here. Where are you? Come home. Station security responded within minutes. The broadcast was traced to a student terminal on the lower education deck. Officers found Resi sitting calmly at her console, her 6 legs tucked beneath her, her ears up. Findu stood beside her. For other students, 2 Kethari and 2 Vilu stood behind them. None of them ran. None of them spoke. They simply waited. They were detained and brought to the security office on the administration level. Overseer Bremali arrived within the hour, her segmented body rigid with fury. She stood in the doorway and looked at the 6 students the way someone looks at a crack in a dam. You will be expelled, she said. All of you. Immediately. And a human will be removed from this station before the next cycle. Resi said nothing. Findu said nothing. They sat in their chairs and waited because they had already done the only thing they came to do. Then the door opened again. Instructor Polani walked in. She was still in her sleep clothes, her feathers ruffled, her eyes sharp. She walked past Bramali without looking at her and stood in front of the security officer's desk. I gave her the broadcast access codes. Polani said. Bramali turned. What? The student did not hack the system. I provided my instructor credentials to access the ambient broadcast channel. The responsibility is mine. It was a lie. Resi knew it. Findu knew it. Polani had done nothing of the sort. But the old instructor stood there with her shoulders straight and her voice clear, and she was choosing, right now, in this room, to stop being afraid. Bramali stared at her. You are confessing to unauthorized use of a station communication system. I am confessing to something much worse, Polani said. I have taught natural history for 40 years. I have followed every approved curriculum the Council has ever issued. I have presented the galaxy to my students exactly as I was told to present it. And I am telling you now that I have been teaching incomplete truths for my entire career, and I am ashamed of it. The room went quiet. The security officers looked at each other. Bramali's compound eyes reflected the overhead lights in fractured patterns. This is not a matter of curriculum, Bramali said carefully. It is entirely a matter of curriculum, Polani said. We erased an entire branch of a planet's biology because it frightened us. We told children that Earth was a garden when it is a wilderness. We told them humans were farmers when they are the descendants of creatures who ran beside wolves. I stood in my classroom and taught a lie by omission every single day, and a human walked through my door and told the truth, and we punished him for it. What does that say about us? Before Bramali could respond, the security officer's console chimed. Then again, Formal requests were arriving. Faculty members across the station, one after another, were submitting official petitions to the Council to review the harmonization protocol as it applied to Earth. A Gorvan biology teacher, a Kethari communications specialist, a Vilu historian. More coming every minute, the console chiming like a heartbeat. Bramali looked at the screen. Her mandibles clicked once. She said nothing and left the room in his quarters. 2 decks below, DAV sat on the edge of his bed. He had been awake when the howl started. He had not moved since. The sound came through the walls, muffled but unmistakable. The voices of wolves, calling across a distance that could not be measured in kilometers, calling across centuries, across species, across every line that someone had drawn and said, "You are not allowed to remember this." DAV closed his eyes. He did not smile. He just listened, and the station sang around him, and somewhere in the dark, something that had been silent for a very long time was finally being heard. The next morning, a priority message arrived from the Galactic Council. It was not addressed to Bramali or Polani or DAV. It was addressed to the students of Palaner Station. Your request for a formal review of Earth biological records has been received. A delegation will arrive in 14 days. The shuttle doors opened, and every guard in the docking bay reached for a weapon. The creature that walked out beside DAV was nothing like the photographs. Photographs could show shape and color and size, but they could not show presence. The wolf moved with a weight that had nothing to do with its body. It was gray and silver, thick-furred, with golden eyes that swept the room the way a general surveys a battlefield. It was not large by Earth predator standards, but it filled the docking bay the way a fire fills a dark room. Every eye locked onto it. Every body went still that IT was not on a leash. It was not restrained. It walked at Dav's left hip with the calm, measured stride of something that had absolutely nothing to prove. The council delegation had arrived 3 days earlier. 12 species, 46 representatives. They had come to evaluate whether the harmonization protocol should be amended regarding Earth. Bramali sat among them, silent and watchful, her compound eyes reflecting the wolf's silver fur. Davy had agreed to give one final presentation on one condition. He wanted to show them something no recording could carry. He had contacted Earth. The transport had taken 3 days, and now he stood in the center of the delegation chamber with a living wolf beside him and said nothing at all. He let them look. The wolf's ears rotated slowly, tracking every sound. Its nose worked the air, reading the room in ways that none of them could understand. It did not growl. It did not bare its teeth. It pressed its shoulder against Dav's leg, not out of fear, but out of habit. The way a partner stands close in an unfamiliar place. Not hiding behind him, standing with him. Findu was in the gallery. His armored plates had locked so tightly they creaked. Ressi sat beside him, perfectly still, her wide eyes fixed on the wolf. A Gorvan delegate spoke first, his voice cracking. "It is not restrained." "No," Davy said. "It could attack anyone in this room." "It could. Then why does it not?" DAV looked down at the wolf. It looked up at him. Something passed between them that was older than language, older than civilization, older than every protocol and regulation that had ever been written by any species in the galaxy. It was the look of 2 creatures that had chosen each other a long time ago and had never stopped choosing. "Because it does not want to," DV said. "And because I asked it not to. And because we have been having this conversation, my species and its species, for 15,000 years. That is longer than most civilizations in this galaxy have existed. This animal is not my pet. It is not my tool. It is the living descendant of the first friend humanity ever had. And you erased it because you could not understand it." He knelt beside the wolf. Slowly, gently, he placed his hand on the side of its neck. The wolf leaned into his touch, its eyes half closed. The gesture was so small and so natural that it barely registered as movement, and yet it said everything. Every report that had been sealed, every record that had been scrubbed, every truth that had been buried under the word harmonization. All of it was there, in the slight pressure of a wild animal leaning into a human hand. DAV stood and faced the delegation. "This is what you were afraid of," he said. "Not the teeth, not the claws, not the hunt. You were afraid of this. That something born to kill could choose freely and completely to be gentle, and that we could choose the same. You erased wolves because they proved that strength and tenderness are not opposites. That the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a predator. It is a predator that has learned to love. And you were right to be afraid, because once you know that it's possible, you can never see the universe the same way again." The chamber was silent for a long time. The wolf sat at Dav's feet, watching the room with patient golden eyes. Bramolly stood. She looked at the wolf. The wolf looked back at her. For one long moment, something moved behind those compound eyes, something that might have been recognition or might have been something she did not have a word for. Her mandibles parted, then closed. She sat back down without speaking. The delegation voted. 39 in favor, 7 abstaining, none opposed. The harmonization protocol, as it applied to Earth, was suspended pending full review. Earth's biological records would be restored. All of them. Every predator, every creature with teeth and claws, and the capacity for violence and the capacity for grace. The wolves would be remembered. Weeks later, DAV stood at the front of the classroom again. Not as a guest. Permanent lecture. The display screen behind him had changed. Where 4 lines of text had once described an entire planet, there were now hundreds of entries. Forests stretching across continents. Oceans teeming with life. Mountains and deserts and rivers and ice fields. And animals. Bears standing in rushing water. Eagles riding columns of warm air. Sharks gliding through blue silence. And wolves. Wolves running through snow, gray and silver and wild, their golden eyes burning like small, steady fires. Ressi sat in the front row. Findu sat beside her. He was still nervous around DAV, but less so. His plates were loose now. Comfortable, DAV pressed the button on his old audio device. The wolf howl filled the room, long and low and reaching. This time, nobody flinched. Ressi raised her hand. DAV, what did it feel like? The first time a wolf trusted a human. DAV looked at her. He thought for a moment. Outside the window, the stars burned in their ancient silence. And somewhere impossibly far away, a blue world turned in the light of its sun. And on that world, in forests and mountains and places that had never been tamed, wolves were still calling to each other across the dark. Like the whole world